Services, and she is the director. And this is a topic that I think I mentioned in an email before. I've been here a long time, and I don't know enough about this as I should. So we really appreciate your. I feel like that's probably pretty prevalent around the college. So much appreciated, and I'll just turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Hume. I really appreciate you making the connection. This is exciting. I'm just loving the energy in this room. I was talking like this natural light is incredible. What a wonderful space to get to connect. I'm gonna try. I don't really feel like being Sally Jesse Raphael and walking all over with the microphone. I'm gonna try and stay sort of here just so we'll have the microphone on. But yeah, so I'm Erin Benson. I'm trying to get a good feel for my audience. I'm assuming that you're mostly faculty and staff.
Yes.
Is that assumption correct? Nobody else has a different sort of professional identity or student identity? Okay, great. Well, cool. So you're just helping me. I spoke to a group and I laid down a challenge and said, I don't get to get in front of faculty very often. So now I can really celebrate this. So thank you so much. Really want to make sure that you get what you want to get out of this. So I encourage questions, and I can really kind of adapt. So if there's something where you just flew by this slide and I really wanted to dig into it deeper, we'll dig into it deeper. And then I'll also say, I'm also a resource for you at any time. So I love to make the offer of purchasing you a cup of coffee or tea and meeting you somewhere on campus or near campus to talk about accessibility specifically in your area, or how we can work together to continue to create a more inclusive and accessible environment at UGA or beyond. I'm actually talking to someone in Sierra Leone right now about accessibility, and we're trying to, it's a former Mandela scholar, and so we're trying to actually put a proposal in for that. So I love to geek out about this stuff. It's okay if you don't know a lot. It's constantly changing, much like you would see in your field too. So I think that'll be really fun to get your perspective, especially with your specialty areas. So really, we'll continue to adapt and evolve with this presentation. Any questions or any feedback immediately? I can't hear you. You're talking too fast. Nope, we're good. All right. I will try not to call somebody out if they're eating, but I do love if I see that you're kind of intrigued by something. I'm like, do you agree with me? Or have you seen this before? You can avert eye contact. I will not do that. Okay, so quick just sort of overview of the agenda. I'm going to give you a brief overview on disability because I think a lot of times when we hear that term, we don't actually really know what it means or what it encompasses. So we'll talk about that briefly. I'll give you just some quick numbers to give you a better idea of what we're seeing with our population of students here. And then we're really going to dig into universal design. So we're really going to be thinking about, I'm going to introduce a term to you now, and we're going to really dig into it a little bit later, but we're going to talk about born accessible. So what are those things that we can be thinking about proactively on the front end that really consider our wider audience to make people know, hey, we thought about you, we want you to have a seat for a place at this table. So I'm just going to call out real quickly, another thing that I really like about this room is that you have multiple options for seating. So when I'm looking at these seats, I know that that's not accessible for everyone. I think the wheels are really cool. I just got to sit in one of these in another classroom the other day, but I'll tell you that my blood pressure goes up when I go into a space and I just see these and I don't see any other options. So I love that you have some adjustable tables over there. I know that as someone that came in and used a mobility device such as a wheelchair would be able to utilize that table, and they would also be able to be a part of this. So just wanted to say kudos. Hopefully as you're going through this, you'll probably see a lot of things like, I didn't even know that what I was doing was being proactive and accessible. So really excited about that. And then hopefully we'll have some time at the end to really kind of talk about what's one or two things that you've gained from this that you'd like to try and kind of incorporate. Because one other thing that I think might happen as we're going through this, I'm going to be giving you a lot of tips and suggestions. It couldn't get really overwhelming. And I recognize that you have a ton on your plate. And so having, getting an accommodation letter from us, let's say halfway through the semester, can kind of blindside you. So I want to make sure that we're going to be partners working together and really kind of look at what are those sort of small bites that we can go ahead and take to really get us to where we ultimately want to be. So one thing I like to share is kind of the operating model that our office has adopted. So we use a social construct model, and it's constantly evolving, But when we think about disability, we see disability as a difference. So originally when disability services came out, it was a big focus on this deficiency or abnormality with disability. And so it was really focusing on, well, what's wrong with you? We see it as a difference. It's a component of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we're really excited to have been folded in more to those conversations as we look at our strategic plans on DEI work. The other piece, and I think this is really critical, is you can have a diagnosis, you can have a condition, but really, when you need access or accommodations is when there are barriers in the environment. So it's really a relationship between the individual and the society. And so the environment is causing a barrier. So when I'm working with students or when I'm looking in spaces, I'm really kind of looking for what are those barriers that's keeping someone from being able to fully demonstrate their knowledge, their skills, and their abilities. And then this helps me build my case that we really need to think about universal design or born accessible. What are those things that we can be doing on the front end in a proactive way so that we're not having to retrofit and change things later on when we realize that we're missing our entire audience. We're missing people in our audience. So what is that audience? So at UGA, disability is a very broad term. We are guided by federal law. So we have Section 504 and my favorite, Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act. Does anybody know what 508 is related to? Oh, my gravy friends, I think you're gonna eat this up. That's all about technology and accessibility. So we're talking about if you are posting something online and it's public facing and it's not accessible for someone with a print-related disability, or if you're putting a video on social media and representing the institution, or if you're putting it on your website and it's public facing and it doesn't have closed captions, we're actually violating a federal law. So that's a big one, and that's one of my favorite ones to not say in a scary way. It's more to say, hey, what an opportunity. We can go ahead and start thinking about this on the front end, and then we don't have to worry about it. So we're really making sure that we're reaching our full audience. So Section 504 and Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, and then we have the Americans with Disabilities Act. That happened in 1990, it was very exciting. I remember watching it get signed, and we were still really thinking about disability as something that we could see. It was very visible, so it would be a physical disability. A lot of what we were talking about was physically being able to access a building. In 2008, we had further amendments to the Americans with Disabilities Act, which sort of lowered what I say sort of the threshold of determining disability, and really helped to include what we call our hidden, non-apparent, or visible disabilities. And so you can see from this list here that a lot of the disabilities that are listed are things that we would consider wouldn't necessarily be apparent. So a psychological disability such as depression or bipolar disorder, in a lot of senses, we're not licensed clinicians, so we might have a suspicion about somebody, but we can't diagnose that person, and we don't necessarily know if that person has a disability. We work with a lot of students with chronic health impairments. We saw this increase significantly during the pandemic because we were working with a lot of students who had a condition that made them immunocompromised. And so I got to collaborate with lots of different faculty on campus during that time to figure out, okay, what can we do to make sure the student can still engage in your hybrid course, but not physically come into class. You may be aware that that sort of remote attendance, as we called it, ended in the summer of 2021. So now we're back into that sort of face-to-face modality with most of our classes. But we do still, those students often find other barriers sort of in that environment. So we're working with students with cancer, with lupus, with Crohn's disease, and we're working with them to see what are their functional limitations. But when I'm looking at it from the university center, I'm like, what are those barriers that are preventing access? And so sometimes a student might not experience a barrier in your class. So you might not get a letter from us. Other times a student might identify or think that they're going to have a barrier in that class, and they want you to go ahead and know what accommodations they're eligible for. So that could be, the student had a processing disorder, so their processing speed was slower. They might need some additional time to complete their tests. That's a pretty common one. You've probably had to deal with our forms in our office. We're always open to feedback. not necessarily wild about conversing about that during this presentation, but you can certainly email me and I will take your feedback. We are constantly trying to figure out how we can have a better partnership with faculty to really improve that experience, because you are our partners. We are here to work together. Any questions? I know I'm going kind of fast and sort of going off in some different areas, but I'm hoping to sort of build this compelling case for you. We're good? Yes.
I've actually got a very quick question.
Yeah.
From a faculty standpoint, when a student asks me or identifies themselves as having one or more such disabilities,
Yeah.
My next question is, have you engaged with the DRC? And usually I ask them to do so before I can make accommodations. Is that a reasonable stance for faculty to take?
That is a very reasonable stance.
Okay.
That's actually also helping to protect the university. If it's not something that you would do for sort of any student, then we're starting to treat that student as if they have a disability, even though they haven't gone through the process. Now, sometimes the students say, oh, I've tried, I've had difficulties, they won't accept what I've got. We can work with students provisionally for a semester if they have limited documentation, and we can connect them with resources to get the documentation that we need. And so, if you did have a student and they shared that report to you, you're more than welcome to reach out to me directly, and I can kind of help figure out how we can navigate that piece. But yeah, that's a very, very good point. Now, if it's something you would do for any student, you're like, oh yeah, you can have my PowerPoints. I share my PowerPoints with everybody. That's fine. You don't need to go through me if that's what they're saying the barriers. But if it's something where you're like, I'll do it if I'm federally obligated to do it, but this would be something that I wouldn't necessarily want to do.
Great, thank you.
Great question. Really appreciate that. So, what are these numbers looking like? Last year we served 2,900 students. So at UGA, we are just close to almost 7% of the students that are registering with our office. I want to say two things. First, these are students who meet the same criteria as their peers to be admitted to UGA. So we're talking about smart students, right? High achieving students. They may have had accommodations in K through 12, but that was providing them with access so that they could fully demonstrate their knowledge skills and abilities. You're going to hear me say that a lot. So that's one piece, right? So there are students that are admitted to our office. We work with undergraduates, graduates, and our professional schools. So accommodations are kind of everywhere. One of the things we'll hear when we're sort of engaging in an interactive process is sometimes, well, they're not going to have this in the work world. And guess what? Accommodations apply in the work world. They might look a little bit different. Sometimes there are less barriers, sometimes there are more barriers, but there is a process. And so it's not our job to figure out what accommodations they're going to have in the work world, but so it is our job to accommodate them. If you've gotten that letter that has those accommodations, does that mean I can say that a student needs to have a word bank, and in some course that you're teaching, a word bank would fundamentally alter the nature of the course? No. If you get that letter from us and you see an accommodation on it, you're like, I feel like this is going to fundamentally alter the nature of the course. I am very concerned about this accommodation. Don't have that conversation with the student. I know it's encouraging. Have it with us. We will be that person to make that negotiation piece. We just got done meeting with some professional development pieces with some lawyers in the field specific to higher education and disability. And they also emphasize when you're having that interactive process on a fundamental alteration, it can't just be the faculty member and the disability provider deciding that. We really need to get someone from the department head per se. We need to have multiple perspectives on that to make a very a clear determination on that piece. So we're actually working on sort of revamping how we do that so we can be really clear in the process and make sure that everybody knows kind of what the rules are. But my biggest sort of caution would be, if you do have a concern, we want to know that. We want to work with you. So please contact us so we can work through that. Yes?
That's kind of hits on one of the main concerns I had, which is I feel like I've been getting more open-ended and sort of broader requests for accommodations from DRC over the past few years. I totally get a lot of that is for completely legitimate reasons. We're training students for media industries, many of which are built around hard deadlines, either for getting work done or for working in collaboration with somebody else. I am all about helping students learn how to manage and come up with ways of meeting those deadlines, but a lot of the accommodation requests I get say basically, sometimes a student can't turn anything in and they are not in a position to tell you about it beforehand. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
So how can we engage with you all and sort of figure out more about the nature of the
Yeah.
accommodation and how we can make sure the student is, I'm not even care about the alteration of the course necessarily, but not getting the lessons that I'm trying to impart for them that they're going to need later in life.
I think that's great, and the first thing would be, yes, let's definitely have a dialogue about that. You know, the deadline extensions are by no means meant to be a blanket for every single assignment. What we really appreciate, and I think there's more work that we can be doing, and really having your feedback is incredibly helpful.
Mhm.
We have, like I shared the number of students, we have a lot of students. You have a lot of students that you're working with. That interactive process, that time for us to talk through each piece can be very time consuming. But there are certainly in some classes where, yeah, you cannot have an extension on every single piece. What are you communicating in the syllabus? That's one of the first things I'm looking at, is how much of these assignments are given to the students in advance notice to where they can really prepare and know what's expected of them, so that maybe they can sort of build in an additional buffer so that it's not this last, you know, they know that sometimes they're going to have a flare up. There's going to be something that keeps them from being able to do what they need to do, but they've already done a lot of the prep work. So maybe they can do a quick turnaround. Maybe they can get it back to you within an extra day. Or maybe they, you know, get hospitalized, but they already have the document and they can get that to you. So this is awesome. You're gonna be frustrated with me too. It's a case-by-case situation, and that's what makes it so difficult. And that's why, for me, my big focus in the next few years is to really work on improving those relationships with faculty. I know that sometimes we can be perceived as, well, the DRC told me I have to do this, and then no ifs, ands, or buts. And I think we can make a much better experience for the student and for the university if we're working together on it. So I know that's a very broad answer, but I would say, you know, and I also recognize that you can probably get letters from us from more than one student in the class, and each letter is going to have a different coordinator that's on it. I really see my role as the director as helping to be a conduit between faculty and our office, and so I'm happy to work with you kind of comprehensively on what that piece is, knowing that there are some times where we might have to extend a little bit more grace. But yeah, I think you have a fair point, especially in you know, journalism and media and reporting. These things are happening in real time. Yes, sir.
So I think kind of an extension on that is, I've had quite a few students that seem to have a blanket absence excuse. And that really causes conflict with students in the
yes.
class that have to adhere to an attendance policy.
Yep.
And I'm not allowed to say why this person isn't required to adhere to the
Yeah.
attendance policy. And when you're in an intimate reporting class where people are assigned to work with each other and things,
Oh, yeah.
that can become very awkward very quickly.
Yes.
How do we deal with that?
Yeah.
And is there really such a thing as a blanket attendance policy?
So,
a blanket excuse?
That's really where we look to you to help us out, because in some classes, if it's a lecture-based course and, you know, it's just pure lecture, the student can access the material and they just need to show up for tests. Well, yeah, we probably could make a case that if the student wants to do that and needs to do that, they could. It really is that's where you help us figure out what that fundamental alteration is. And so with those letters, and again, this is something that I want to work on, and you guys would be wonderful for workshopping some of this, is how can we make that language more clear and direct, but not overwhelming, so that we're not giving you like 3 paragraphs on every single accommodation. There's a form link there that you can complete to let us kind of know at what point do you think a student has missed so much that they cannot successfully complete this course. And so we take those, we share that with the student once it's been completed, and we say, these are the expectations in this course. If you have concerns about this and don't think you can meet these pieces, let us know so we can further engage in that interactive process with that. So that information is really helpful for us to kind of see, okay, yeah, hey, your class is completely interactive every single day. There's, you know, it's active learning, there's discussions, they're working on a project in class. If they've missed this much, you're not going to be able to actually accurately assess them, because so much of the grade is based on that participation piece. And so again, we want to find kind of that sweet spot with that, realizing that there's, you know, no, you can only miss 2 classes unless you give me like the biggest sob story of your life, and then maybe I'll change it. We want to protect our students too, because having to continue to share and facilitate understanding on their disability when they've already demonstrated and it's been vetted by our office using the University System of Georgia documentation guidelines, that's not fair to that student either, so we have to balance that. What I say when students are noticing other pieces, and this is really helpful in our professional school programs, is from a professionalism standpoint, you know, I can't discuss what other students' situations are. So a fun time where you can fall back on FERPA. Like, I'm sorry, that's a FERPA matter that I can't discuss. But each situation is gonna be unique, and I know that you're gonna be like, well, Erin just tells me to call her anytime that there's a question. I think the more we can work through those pieces, I think we'll be able to figure out the nuances of that specific course. Oh, this is fun. Okay, both raise your hands at the same time.
Dodie, you go, Dodie.
Oh, okay, so I, occasionally will have a semester where I just get a ton of them.
Yeah.
But it always says, you know, we encourage the student to reach out to you,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a ghost DRC.
Mm-hmm.
What is, you know, and I have been fortunate so far is that I have been able to kind of try to take it as an opportunity, how the workplace is changing, how might I revamp, to try to keep it as equitable and as much opportunity as possible
Yeah.
for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm starting to wonder, do I do that when maybe only one out of the 19 people, you know, that you sent me a note about even comes and talks to me?
Just teed me off for this. This is perfect. I said we serve just about like under 7% of students. About 19% of our students, this is using national averages, has a disability. So that non-apparent, those students, you might not actually know what all the needs are in your class. And so, you know, I think that's one of the big pieces, is just sort of thinking about, okay, I could also have a student who has a temporary impairment happen in the middle of the semester, and then they're experiencing barriers, or a student gets diagnosed halfway through the semester and has a disabling condition. So I think some of those times where it's like, well, I don't know. But in terms of like those students communicating with you and sort of talking to you, we can't force them to. What I've seen with some faculty that I've worked on, they've kind of done that sort of, they kind of do a little bit of overkill at the beginning of the semester, not just during the syllabus, but like, hey, if you have a disability and you need accommodations, you know, please let me know. I'm so excited to work with all students in my class. You know, I'm here I want to make sure that you have the best experience in here. So continuing to sort of say that a couple times during the semester, especially at the beginning, we've seen that students are more likely to actually follow up and talk to their professors. You can certainly, especially if you're like, okay, I've got your letter. If you haven't heard from the student, that doesn't mean that you just don't provide their accommodations, but you could send an email and say, hey, so glad you're in my class. Please know I'm happy to talk if you want. And you can even reference your syllabus of like, these are my office hours. If you want to talk, I'm happy to do it. So again, I think there's also some things we can continue to be trying to work with our students on, which is specific to like student advocacy. And I'm excited to say that for the first time in like 4 years, we're fully staffed. So it's a really exciting time to kind of start trying to figure out more how we can really focus on that proactive piece. Did that cover your question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yes, well, I'm so happy that, you know, when I get the letters, I always feel I'm getting a directive.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you have to do this, there's this contract, go online, sign it, do what you have to do. I'm so happy to hear that that I can call, because I teach a capstone, and it's one project the whole semester. Teamwork is key.
Yeah.
Team communication is key.
Yeah.
But, you know, you have a student that may be absent for whatever reason that I can't tell, and just making it work in those conditions is extremely hard, especially when, for instance, I think that how to immunize a team from people who don't work is to have peer evaluations weigh a lot.
Yeah.
Well, they're evaluating and they don't know a factor. And so I have never been able to like figure out the best way to do this. I've always been super worried about that. For me, my nightmare is to get a DRC letter when I teach campaigns.
And my goal in the long term is to make you excited when you get a letter from our office. Because we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion here, right? And we want to make sure that we're meeting our students. So doesn't mean that we can say, oh, hey, student who has a chronic illness and you're going to have to miss class, you're not going to be able to like actually get your diploma because you can't complete this course. It requires more creativity though, right? We might need to figure out, okay, are there alternate ways that the student can contribute and engage? Maybe the student can't physically get on campus, but can they jump on Zoom for this piece? Are there other ways to do it? Now, part of it, we have to work with the student to say, hey, yeah, people are gonna kind of notice. It's probably one of those situations where it'd be really helpful if you don't have to tell them what your disability is, but I think it's pretty helpful to tell, hey, I have a condition that sometimes makes it difficult for me to physically be here. Here's how I'm going to work with that. So I would welcome the next time you get one of those nightmares. I would love to work directly with you on that and brainstorm and sort of see, because the more I can kind of dig just a little bit deeper into what that looks like, hopefully we can figure out together, getting your perspective, what are there other ways? Can we get creative with it? But yeah, I understand that sometimes getting those letters can be that way, and certainly the goal is to figure out, recognizing that there is that federal piece, right? We don't want to put compliance is important. We don't want to have an Office of Civil Rights complaint. We want to make sure that our students have, feel welcomed and included. But we also want to make sure that by doing that, you feel like you have the support that you need, and it's not just on your shoulders. Yeah. Okay. We've talked about that already. I do want to do a quick plug. I'm really excited about the well-being initiatives on campus. Our office actually just got restructured, so we are within student affairs, but we report to the Associate Vice President for Student Wellbeing within Student Affairs. And so there are some incredible initiatives that can really meet students' needs with and without disabilities throughout campus, and we're really excited to get to be a part of that piece. So if you're not familiar with the wellbeing resources, I strongly recommend that you go to the wellbeing website. It's just well-being.ega.edu. There are so many resources on like mindfulness, lots of apps that students can use to kind of help with, recognizing that we all get anxious sometimes, and we all have stressors. When we're looking at it from a disability standpoint, we're looking at what is that severity compared to the rest of the population? Is it impacting you with daily life activities, or is this something that just kind of pops out every once in a while? And a little bit of anxiety is good too, right? We see that even with test taking. So it's trying to find that balance, but there's some fabulous resources. We work really closely with student care and outreach. So again, if funding is a barrier for a student to get the actual documentation that they need or to get a psychological evaluation, we can work with them and other campus partners to get students connected. So strongly recommend this. Yes?
So in this organization, what is the relationship between DRC and Student Care and Outreach?
So
is Student Care and Outreach part of the well-being organization?
yes. So the portfolio for well-being, does everyone know Dr. Bo Seagraves? He's awesome. He's awesome. So he's the Associate Vice President of Student Affairs, specifically for well-being. So his portfolio includes the University Health Center, Recreational Supports, the Disability Resource Center, Student Care and Outreach, and University Testing Services. So that's where we do the Grady Statement. That's also a department that I supervise. Like, I have two departments. So University Testing Services is also a part of my team. So yeah, that's kind of where that structure plays. But well-being in general is really the goal, is to have that infused in everything we do. So within student affairs and beyond. Couple more things before we get into the fun stuff. How am I doing on time? I'm having too much.
You're about halfway through.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you. So one of the things, sometimes you might have a student who came to you, right, and said, I have a disability, and you say, okay, we'll definitely work with the Disability Resource Center. They're great. Their director is amazing. And they're like, no, I'm a student in law school, and I don't want anybody to know that I used accommodations. So I think on one side, talking about confidentiality, I can't share what a student's disability is with you. Some students are very open. They want to tell you everything, right? That's fine too. But I can't share that, but I can certainly talk through like, oh, yeah, here are some of the functions, here are some of the barriers the student's experiencing, let's work through this sort of together. So it doesn't mean that if you call me, I'm like, I have never heard of this student, I don't know what you're talking about. You have that FERPA piece, right, as the instructor on record, we can kind of work together. I just can't tell you what their disability is. So it's our responsibility to make sure that we're protecting that. So just because Johnny in your class tells you about the disability doesn't mean you go to a session like this and say, hey, everybody, Johnny, Johnny Disclosure over here, he's got a disability. I bet you have him in your class too. Isn't he a wild card? That's not confidentiality. So we want to be respectful of that piece. But one of my things, and this is where I'm like, please help me bust this myth for students. It does not show up on your diploma or transcript. We're providing access. We're providing equal access. The student is the one that's responsible for the success. So we're not giving them a leg up. We're making sure that we're leveling that playing field so they can fully demonstrate their knowledge, skills, and abilities. So if you can tell students that if they do say, oh, I do, but the stigma of it. One of the other things we're working on doing, I'm not gonna change our name anytime soon. I think Disability Resource Center, I want to honor the fact that disability is a component of an identity piece, right? So for some people, that is their identity. If I take disability away from the name, then I'm ignoring some of our population. I also recognize that not everybody wants to say that they have a disability or affiliated with that. I'm working on changing our senior disability coordinators to senior accommodation coordinators because that's actually what they're doing. We've already had our intake team review the documentation, look at it, and they're the ones that are actually working on the accommodations piece. And so I think that'll be really helpful too for those referrals where a student's like, oh, disability note, like, oh, they have somebody that can work with you on accommodations. Accommodations is a much easier term for people. Disclosure, that's the other thing, it's voluntary. So again, there's some students who don't register with us because of stigma. There's some who don't realize that they have a condition that is disabling, that would be considered a disability. There are others who just don't know that we exist, unfortunately. So again, this is where I'm creating my new sort of allies out here with that. But a big thing is accommodations are retroactive. So if you get a letter from me that's towards the end of the semester, does that mean you need to go back through all the other work that they did the semester before? No, we're talking about moving forward. So that's a big piece of that. Oh, I really wanted to show you this video. You said we're halfway?
You can do it.
Okay, I'm gonna do it. This is to kind of help with destigmatizing, like, what do I do if I'm interacting with someone with a disability? It's one of my favorites.
Good morning, Mom. Morning there. Ma'am. Morning, Alice! There's no need to be awkward. Poor Bob. Like so many of us, he just doesn't know how to interact with people with disabilities.
It's pretty easy, really. People with disabilities are people first.
We need the same things that every person needs, like respect.
Good morning, everyone.
Attention!
Okay. If we need to be more specific.
The easiest way to show respect is to focus on the person, not the disability. It's okay. You'll get the hang of it.
One easy way to focus on the person is to watch the person signing and not their interpreter.
Or their companion.
It's really cool that you'd like to help, but do us both a favor and please ask me first. What you think might be helping? I got you. Wait, might actually not.
If you'd like to offer me help, let me hold on to your elbow. Don't take mine.
Hey, would you like to take mine?
Sure.
Assistive devices help us to live our lives. They're really important and really personal.
Grabbing them only makes it weird for everyone.
But please only touch our devices and service animals if we've given you permission. And don't take it personally if I ask you not to. Remember that my service animal helps me all the time. Neither of us would like it if we were separated.
Remember, we make our own decisions. We sign documents, vote, volunteer, work, and pay taxes.
We get married.
So don't introduce me just because I have a great smile.
Just because I'm blind does not mean I'm deaf.
Just because I'm deaf doesn't mean I'm blind.
And just because I use a wheelchair doesn't mean that I can't sweep you off your feet.
So take a deep breath, relax. We don't bite.
Unless we're really hungry.
Hello ladies, how are you?
And if you're not sure what to do, just ask.
Hi, would you still like to see a menu?
No thanks, but can you please read it to me?
Sure, definitely.
Just treat us the way you would want to be treated, and we'll all be okay.
Morning. Good morning. Morning, Alice.
Awkward no more. Nice job, Bob. Go forth and be human.
Hey, okay, so I know that's a little, like, it's a little cheeky, but it's fun. I think it's a great one. I know that a lot of those disabilities seem more apparent, but I do find that a lot of times when we're talking about disabilities, we're even just kind of, we're not sure what we can ask and what we can say. And so I think that provides a great message and always makes me giggle a little bit. So I was very validated to hear some giggles. Thank you for your giggles. Then we're gonna kind of shift from speaking to specific kind of accommodations to more like, what are those things that we can do kind of on the front end to just automatically make the Disability Resource Center have to disappear, right? No, we're not going out of business anytime soon. But I would love for us to be able to focus our time and energy on those really complex situations and needs, and less on trying to figure out how we can make just this space more accessible in general. So this is where we get into some low-hanging fruit, if you will, where we can really start thinking, oh, this is one thing that I can already adopt, or hey, I'm gonna pat myself on the back, I'm already doing that. This is great. So I always like to start with a blurry cartoon, but I'm gonna make it accessible to you, so I'm gonna describe it to you. Great example of what we can do sometimes for making our PowerPoints more accessible. So here we have a cartoon, if you will, where it looks like they're in a snowy part of a region, and there's a guy who is scooping up the snow. He's clearing the steps for what looks like probably like a school. These are like some maybe elementary, maybe some middle school students that are trying to access the school. There's a group of students that's waiting, and there's a student that's kind of in the corner who is using a wheelchair, and he says to the man with the shovel, "Could you please shovel the ramp?" And the man says, "All these other kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through, then I will clear the ramp off for you." And then this smart kid that's in the wheelchair, he goes, "But if you shovel the ramp, we can all get in." And I think that is sometimes those things where we're like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be just too much, this is so much work, I have all these other things that I have to be doing, you know, I'm trying to get tenure, all these different things. How can I also do this? When a lot of it's like, hey, if we do this, everybody's gonna be able to access it. Doesn't matter if you're that 6.9% of students that are registered with the Disability Resource Center, or that total estimated 19%, or students just in general who enjoy multiple learning modalities. So that for me is a big sell when we're talking about universal design. So a ramp is a wonderful example of universal design. It's designed with one person's needs in mind, and yes, we can all use that. I use curb cuts as an example. Curb cuts, we've used curb cuts on campus and just in cities in general with roller luggage. We use it if we have a cute dog that we don't want to have to walk all over campus. I've seen the cutest strollers on campus with little dogs. Oh my gosh, it's adorable. Or babies. Babies are cool in strollers too. Or if you have a temporary impairment, or if you work in IT and you're having to move a cart from one building to the other building, having those curb cuts is great for everyone, It's universally designed, but it was originally designed specifically for physical accessibility. Same thing with text messaging. So I see some phones out here. Has anybody sent a text while we've been in the room? It's okay. Oh man, please, somebody help me. I need you to say yes. Justin,
I responded to a student email.
Thank you. Oh, perfect. That's great. And you didn't distract me. It's not like you picked up the phone and you're like, hey, student, you need to make sure that you read the syllabus, because that's the first thing I tell students to do. I'm like, it's a lazy question. Don't do a lazy question. Read the syllabus first, then ask. Do you know why text messaging or sort of messaging in general was originally invented? Who would agree? Got excited. Anyone? It was originally designed for individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing to communicate. If you watch Jeopardy, like I do, that cell whatever thing, they like to do like a pretend Jeopardy question in the beginning, or right before, so that they like actually watch their cellular, whatever they're trying to sell you. They do one specifically for text messaging, and this first text message was Merry Christmas, apparently, according to that. Now I probably should check my sources a little bit more on that one, but that commercial right before Jeopardy, that definitely told me that it was Merry Christmas. So I think that's such a neat example, right? There are these things where we originally think of what the purpose is, but now we're able to use it for lots of different reasons. So universal design of products and environments to be usable to all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. So the more we can be doing on that end, proactively just folding it into what we're doing, then we can spend a lot of time trying to figure out what to do with that capstone, right? I'd much rather spend that time on that piece than trying to figure out how we can get a student into a building or have a student be able to access like a PDF. So we're gonna get into that a little bit more. Any questions, feedback, still good? All right. So there's a lot of benefits. It allows for adaptability, it allows for accessibility and efficiency. So we're gonna talk through a couple of different things. I made it really kind of broad, so we can apply things specific to classrooms, but we can also think about the programs that we're putting on and the events that we're putting on and how we are disseminating information to our audiences. So if you see something and you're like, oh, I definitely want to dig into this more, just let me know. So this is language that's becoming more and more prevalent, so that's that striving for born accessible. Not gonna feel like we've already kind of teed this up quite a bit, but I'm just loving this term, born accessible. So when you are making a Word document and you want it to be accessible, if you're writing, like, let's say you're doing your syllabus, you're gonna write it in Word, and then you're going to convert it into a PDF and you're gonna upload it into ELC. If you start in Word and you use styles, does anybody use styles, right? You can do your headings. It's great. I'm a doctoral student. I use APA 7. I love styles because it makes my job so much easier when I'm trying to edit and change things. When we use headings, when we use styles, we're automatically making it navigable for somebody with a print-related disability. So if they're using like a screen reader, or they're highlighting and having it read back to them, they are able to we don't have to sit there through paragraph after paragraph. They can easily scan through the document to get to the information that they need. It'll also let them know what your emphasis is, what's really important. So styles is a big win, and then if you convert that into a PDF, if you do save as a PDF, you are already making it pretty much completely accessible for someone in the PDF format. When we start in Word, our document in Word, and then we do the accessibility pieces, specifically styles is a low-hanging fruit for that one. The other thing is like meaningful hyperlinks. I'm getting the feeling you guys really like meaningful hyperlinks. You don't want your copy or your draft to have like this long URL, blah, 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 blah. So doing meaningful hyperlinks is also gonna help make it accessible. That person's not having to listen to every single letter of that long URL. So those are those pieces. Start with Word, then convert to a PDF. If you've done the things in Word, then you've pretty much, I'm gonna say that's pretty much ready to rock and roll. Yes?
Very quick question on that. 2 years ago, after talking with folks at CTL, I stopped doing PDFs and uploaded them, and on ELC I've moved everything, migrated everything, including my syllabus, but I'm using native HTML pages because, of course, as you know, it maps onto phones real easy compared to PDF. Is that still as accessible for screen readers and things?
It should be. Are you using it specifically, the platform that they have within ELC for that?
Correct.
Oh, yes, ELC is actually pretty accessible.
Okay, great, thank you.
Another beautiful thing with ELC, I don't know if you scroll down very often to the bottom, it's pretty much got a statement on every single page. If something's not accessible, let us know, so we can work on it. Now, I'd rather this person not have to do that, right? That sounds very burdensome, especially if you're opening every single document. But yes, where we get tricky in ELC is when we're like going ahead and redirecting somebody outside of ELC. Or when we are uploading, like, wonderful readings, you don't want your students to have to buy the entire textbook, maybe you scan 2 pages, you put it on. That's really where, when we're generating content and uploading it, that's where we really wanna be thoughtful about what we're putting up. That's also when we wanna be thoughtful when we're curating information, right? So if you are pulling together a bunch of readings for class, I strongly encourage you to work with the library because they can help you find accessible copies. So does anybody know what an inaccessible PDF kind of looks like? If you click on the PDF, and usually you see just like a big blue box, and you can't highlight the text, that means somebody with a screen reader can't read it. Well, we see a lot, and I spent some time, and I was like, no, I'm not gonna do it. I was trying to find some really crummy PDFs that we've seen before, but this is how I describe it when I'm presenting to students, and I get a lot like, oh, yes. You scan it one way, there's the spine in the middle. You can almost not read the last few letters on one page. One scan is this way, the next scan is that way, this way. The font's really, really small. I can guarantee you, I'm gonna place a pretty strong bet on this. I would bet that most of your students aren't gonna read that document, regardless of whether or not they have a permanent disability. And so you are an expert. You are curating and generating all of this incredible content. You want to have rich conversations with your students. When you are using accessible documents, when you're finding that beautiful PDF that you can highlight, it's automatically going to be able to read it, that is going to make more of your students be willing to read it. So find one of those. See if you can find a newer version of it. Or work with someone amazing in your IT team here to say, hey, can you show me if I'm scanning how to make an accessible document? A lot of the scanners now have pretty robust features where they're automatically doing what we call optical character recognition. And so then you can know, hey, I'm putting this together, this is gonna be great. Or, hey, how do I scan but I don't have the spine in the middle of the page? So tap into the resources that you have, and then obviously if you'd like us to consult, we're happy to do that. You may have gotten an email from us. If we have a student that we know has is blind or has a pretty severe traumatic brain injury, where we know that every single document they're using they're gonna be highlighting it and having it right back to them. We make a point when we know that the student's registered in class to reach out to that professor and say, hey, if your stuff's not accessible, we want to kind of work with you on the back end to make it accessible. Would I love to just be able to reach out to everyone and say, hey, let us do this for you? No, we have to kind of work in that sort of behind the scenes sort of cleanup piece to prioritize when we have that identified need. But it would be so nice for you to get that email and be like, oh, my stuff's great. It's all good. That's wonderful. It's one less thing for you to have to worry about. And now you really know you're casting that wider net and you're really reaching that broader audience. I never thought that I would be a champion for something like the new evolution of Explorer, because Explorer was a horrible, right? It was bad. But Microsoft Edge, has anyone used it? Their read aloud feature is incredible. It's really, really robust. So if you want to kind of get an experience and say, how are my students engaging this? What would it be like if a student with a visual impairment or a learning disability was trying to access this document? Use Microsoft Edge. It has a little button right at the top that does a read aloud feature. Why I recommend this one versus some of our other browsers that already have things built in, it has the best voices. It's not Microsoft Sam anymore, right? That was awful. Nobody wanted to use that. But you can get different accents, you can get it in different languages, you can change the speed. Remember I said I was a doctoral student and I'm also working full-time and I have 2 kids and a dog. I use it all the time when I'm trying to get through my readings, especially I'm like, I don't know what, maybe if I put this on speed 3, maybe I will absorb some piece of information from it. I don't know. But I think that's a great way to just kind of test the waters and think, what does my stuff look like to students? So happy to talk. Again, this is where you're like, yeah, I totally want to talk about this more with Erin. Email me. I will buy you a cup of coffee. I'm going to skip this piece. Space, I think it's really important. I really love talking about this space earlier. I know that you have accessible routes to get here. That's great. The lighting in here is amazing. I wish we had this more on campus. We have a lot of students with migraine disorders. This is a lot less triggering than our fluorescent lights. So that's something to think about. If you're meeting with students in your office, I have some where I'm like, I know that lights are really bad for them. I'll go ahead and turn it off and just have them in my office. So I'll be like, do you want to turn the light off? This light is really glaring. We've got the natural light. So just sort of even those little things to really think about. We already talked about, tables and desks and thinking about that from an accessibility standpoint. I was walking in and I saw someone's office and they had like a sign that said vegan. And it looked like it was it your office?
Yes, my office.
Yes! So I'm assuming that was from like some sort of event that you hosted, right?
Yep.
So you're doing such a great example. That's such a great example. You're labeling it, you're thinking about the different dietary needs. Thank you so much. You teed it up so perfectly.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. Thinking about transportation, accessible routes, those are all really, really important things. I have to give a big shout out to your dean. Last year, there was one area where a student could not access their class because of a door. And that's the quickest I've ever seen FMD get a door and turn it into an accessible door. It was amazing. I got goosebumps throughout the whole process. I wanted to cry. I was like, where have you been all my life? This is amazing. And so that advocacy piece is so huge too. So when you have those identified needs, think about your voice. Think about the power of your voice. I can't be everywhere at once, even though I've tried. It doesn't work out. So you can be that person in that room like, oh, hey, we're looking at this new software that we're going to use for our students. I wonder if it's accessible. Being that person and being willing to just ask, hey, have we looked at the accessibility features of this? That's great. You're starting that dialogue. Or, oh, hey, have we thought about captions for the big promo video that we're going to be putting out? Those are so important, and it's just recognizing that privilege that you have in that space to be able to ask that question. So, and it would probably be way more effective than if I just popped in and I was like, did you think about accessibility? These were some of the pieces I was thinking about more from a work standpoint, but again, I want to be respectful of time, so I'm going to fly through this. We already talked about hyperlinks, caption videos. That not only reaches our students who are deaf and hard of hearing. You saw that percentage earlier with veterans. There are a lot of veterans who would never get set up with our office if they've had combat. There's usually tinnitus or residual hearing loss. We're thinking about our broad audience with that. Learning, if the video's in English and English isn't the learner's first language, having that audio and that video is incredibly helpful. You're providing multiple modalities. It's great if you're going back to search through content, so many different pieces. And then I think one of the big things, and this goes back to like, what are those statements that you're saying? Students are watching. So when you're like, hey, at the beginning of the semester, hey, if you have a disability, I'm so excited to work with you. Feel free to, if you haven't already gotten me your letter, please go ahead and send me your letter. I look forward to working with you. That's great. We say it a couple times. But really making sure that we do have a statement on our events. If we're going to host an event, if you need accommodations, who's that person in your department that they're going to contact? If you want to say if somebody needs an interpreter, that takes some time to get that coordinated. You can set a deadline for that. Say, let us know within a week and a half or 2 weeks if an interpreter is needed. You're saying, hey, we're thinking about you. We want you to be here, but we'd like to know in advance so we can give you the best possible experience that you can. So when we have those statements, it really lets people know, hey, we want you to have a spot. We want you to have a place at the table. We want you to be here. We don't know all of your needs. We're not psychic, but we want to figure that out. And then we have to be ready to respond when we get that. So that's why it's so important to have it on your syllabus. It's great that we have it on ELC. It's also great when we walk that walk and we tell our students, like, please let me know if something's not working. Please, so we can work through that together. So all that, oh my gosh, if you want to see my Pinterest board on how you can design text for people with anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, there are some really cool resources out there that can really help you think about the different users and who all's engaging with it, because it's not just those apparent invisible disabilities. What sort of trigger warnings do we have? Do we have something available in if you do captions, you have a transcript. If you have a student where that specific content is really triggering, are we wanting them to see the video, or could they actually just read that transcript? The rest of your class can see the video. Can they step out and read that transcript? And does that give them, that still accomplish what you were hoping to get out of that piece? Yes?
When it relates to anxiety, sometimes that is, I'll just use the word temporary,
Yeah.
maybe, or situational.
Mm-hmm.
How do we deal with students that may not have an accommodation for anxiety, but something triggers
Yeah.
a temporary thing? And I'll use a specific example.
Yeah.
The Covenant shooting
Oh my gosh,
triggered several of my students in my big lecture class.
Yeah.
And I had at least 2 that had been in high schools that had shootings.
Oh my gosh, right? I know. I
Okay,
thought about
and
that a
so,
lot lately.
you know, so that's a triggering event. How do we deal with those anxiety situations? Because I referred all 3 of the students that contacted me to student care and outreach. They did not hear back in a timely manner.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was something that happened and they needed
Yeah.
instant resource.
Yeah.
And that instant resource, so then I referred them to, gosh, I referred them to BARC. I didn't know what else to do.
Okay. Yeah. That would still end up going. I'm on BARC actually. So that would it would still come on student care and outreach's radar. You know, they are also available by phone, so students can easily, you know, call and they'll be able to respond. But counseling and psychiatric services, they are equipped for those sort of situational pieces that pop up. So they take walk-ins. You can call and talk to a clinician on the phone 24/7. They always have somebody that's available to talk. They even have someone from CAPS that works with the UGA PD. So if there was a call, and that person will actually come along with UGA PD. Our UGA PD is pretty impressive. Like, they're really committed to making sure that students feel safe and supported and don't see that as sort of a punitive piece. In terms of those trigger pieces, yes, I mean, I think the more you can let people know sort of in advance so they can kind of make those own decisions too. I know that became more triggering in that instance because there was a real life event that had just happened. But being really clear in your syllabus, and being like, and even just saying, hey, if there is something that you're concerned, it sounds like your students feel comfortable coming to you and talking to you. That's huge. Not everybody's going to feel comfortable coming to you. So thinking about what is it about you and the way you structure your class that makes people feel welcome? What message are you sending with that?
I guess I was also thinking that there
Yeah.
are certain like triggering events now
Yeah.
because they keep repeating themselves, and the university could be, in my estimation, a little more proactive.
Mm-hmm.
If we have a school shooting, we have 40,000 people here that went to high school, and there's a
Yeah.
good chance that hundreds of those
Yeah.
experienced the school shooting. They need a
Yeah.
place to go,
Yeah.
and I didn't feel, I mean, it's happening so frequently, it
Yeah.
seems that the university could be more proactive.
Yeah.
And knowing that those circumstances are there. We also have several issues with severe weather that is
Mhm.
also a triggering event for lots of our students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
I think the work that we're trying to do with well-being, I think there's a lot of opportunity with that, and I'm happy to, if you're comfortable, I'd love to share that feedback
Absolutely.
and observation.
Yeah.
I do think a lot of the resources, if you go to the well-being page, do have some really great resources that even if a student didn't want to necessarily engage with another person, there are communities and resources with a lot of these sort of virtual groups and mindfulness pieces that can also help with that. But weather is one, I've thought about the situational, like what happens in the news and stuff, but weather in particular is not something that I've given much thought to. I think in those situations when you're teaching a class, and you know, and I would imagine, I'm making assumptions here, but you guys deal with really tough stuff, right? Like, so the more upfront you can be with students, or being, you know, again, making, if it does have captions, that's great. You know that in some situations you're gonna already have that transcript, so that when ready, you're already kind of ready for those situations, knowing that unfortunately it's probably gonna happen again.
Since you're taking that information to
Yeah.
student care and outreach, let me add something.
Yeah.
We have to be better with our international students.
Yeah.
We have to be better.
Yeah.
Recently, I have a Turkish student,
Oh, I know. Mm-hmm.
and she said nobody from the university had approached her.
Yeah.
That cannot happen. We
Yeah.
have to be better.
Well, and we just got a new director in our international student life, and that's also within student affairs. And she actually just spoken to our whole team about specifically with that, like how do we figure that? I think one of the other things that's a little bit of a challenge sometimes is some of these things aren't necessarily apparent, right? We don't necessarily know which students in the classroom have been through a traumatic event with having a shooting at a school per se, or, having their hometown ripped apart by a tornado. No, I should have put a trigger warning to the things I'm talking about. Maybe that's what I'm saying. And also sometimes we don't necessarily know where a student's from or what those pieces are. So it does make me think more about universal design doesn't specifically have to be with a specific disability in mind. I would love to hear, what are some of those promising practices? What are those things? You might be more of an expert on that than I am. So what are some of those things that we can be kind of thinking about to create those spaces where students do feel comfortable sharing that aspect? And we also want to make sure that we feel equipped and have the resources. We don't have to be the person that saves the day in that, but we want to make sure that we've got the resources and the connection that we can bring to them. So yeah, I'm more than happy to take that back. And it's been a semester, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that I called at the beginning of the semester because I had so many of these.
Oh,
and it was really going to impact how I tested. And I was very impressed. Somebody in your office sent me over to testing services.
Mm-hmm.
And the person said, "What's your goal with your test? Like, what is your goal?" I said, "Well, there are going to be reports, there are going to be journalists. I need them to know how to find information."
Yeah.
And how to really think critically and creatively in finding. I said, this course is called information gathering. And so this person walked me through a process because my problem was I give these big Scantron tests and they're timed and the testing person said, well, if that's your outcome, then would open book be something? Would maybe 24 hours? Because we didn't want like 19, 20 students going, okay, you guys can stay late.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And so we walked through an entire, so now the whole testing, the whole quiz, the whole assignment thing is different. And I was thinking about how much better I perceive it has been for everybody, not just for those. So I was really appreciative and I said, now that doesn't give me any heartburn about the time limits or anything. And I went, no, this is reasonable. And it was very helpful because I'm not you said, you all are the experts. I'm not an expert here. I certainly didn't know that pedagogy thing that they did, and I was appreciative.
Oh, I really do love my team. I said we were fully staffed earlier. We've got a good thing going on right now. We have people that really want to be creative and get in the weeds. And again, I'm always open to feedback too. I really appreciate you sharing that as just even an example of your willingness to lean in on that is huge.
Well,
it's a two-way street. It's awesome.
This person gave me really good data. I mean, they obviously are expert in this, and they said, well, if this is what you want, if this is the outcome you want, I forgot how, this has been a minute, but said something to the effect that, I said, I get really sick of people, I get kids in capstone, and I go, did you even take information gathering? And, she said, well, a lot of times people can study for tests, they have great memories, they're smart kids, they vomit it out for the test and then forget about it. She said, this tool might help for more, I don't know the word, she used some big words like, I don't know, iterative.
I bet that's my associate director, she's amazing.
But basically said that, it made me feel good because she said, there's a lot of research that shows interacting with the material, for what could take hours of really having to read to find the answers has been proven to be very effective. So
rote memorization is.
Yeah, so I felt like, oh, this is pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. It just made my day. I think we're at time, but I'm happy to hover around if anyone wants to have any further discussions. And my email address again, really easy. It's E as in elephant, walrus. It's not walrus, it's W as in walrus, so it's you.
Oh.
Walrus would be awesome. I just wanted to see if you'd actually write down walrus. EEW@uga.edu.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.